Welcome to Popcast Deluxe, your VHS version of Weekly Cultural Review. I'm Jon Caramanica, a critic at the New York Times.
I'm Joe Coscarelli. I'm a reporter at the New York Times.
For Popcast Deluxe, youtube.com/Popcast. Like and subscribe, comment. Maybe we'll respond. The comment section last week was
Lively.
vivid.
People love to argue about Taylor Swift.
I've learned that. Also in the IG Reel and TikTok comments.
Yep.
Also like TikTok.com/Popcast Deluxe. Get involved there. On IG, Popcast Deluxe as well. People really get active in the comments, so feel free to go off. In the rear view, the Taylor album, what if it's not bad?
That's not what you said before we started taping.
I'm getting to where I said, but what if it's not bad? I spent a lot of time with it over the last few days, and specifically because one of the things we're going to do this week is our sort of edited version, EP/tight LP, 31 songs down to, at least for me, it's a dozen.
Okay.
And I began to think of the Taylor album a lot like Views.
Mm-hmm. Which is another album that I made an edit of.
Yes. Drake's Views came perhaps at his Imperial era, although we are certainly
Still
fully in bigger Imperial era.
It had an anniversary this weekend.
That's right. It was 8 years.
Sure.
Great.
Time flies when you're having views. You know?
It does. and so I was thinking about that particular moment in Drake and how there was the complaint that there was too much, but there was a complaint about lack of innovation, and not the current complaint about lack of topic
Right. It's funny because
innovation.
we've been having the same
These
fight
kinds, yes,
every year for 10 years, basically.
But at that point, it was a little bit sonic innovation was kind of the thing that he was being pummeled for, or lack of. And there are songs on that album that maybe they're not peak Drake, but I think in retrospect, they sound like they're part of the grammar.
Yeah.
And I think listening to this album 3 or 4 more times, I hear the songs more as part of the grammar. Now, 2 things. One, I don't think all of the album, like last week we talked about some of the lyrics being deliberately cringe. I think maybe more of the album is in that format than people give credit for, but I don't know if it's as much as could save the whole album.
Okay. And I had a similar thought about Tortured Poets Department, which is that my biggest complaint, which is the sort of like verboseness of the lyrics and how they ruin the melodies, basically what I like to call Taylor's run-on flow.
The talky.
Like particularly like the one that continues to stand out to me is the line in the title track where she says, "You took the ring off my middle finger and put it on the one." And to me, if you end the line there, it's clean. But then she says, "You put it on the one, they put the wedding ring." I'm like, yeah, we got it, you know. And then she adds like about how it made her feel, and I'm just like, okay, enough. The more I listen to the album, the more I think that character and that tick works for the mode that she is in, which is like driven mad with lust, basically, and love, I guess. And sort of like she's in this jumble of a passionate rebound with someone who she's had a tortured history with. And when I think of it through that lens, I can forgive more of it, but it still makes the songs imperfect to me. So like, but I can buy it as a character and as a concept for the album. And where I'm ultimately landing, we had this discussion a little bit tongue in cheek. Is this Taylor's worst album? For me, and I think you, it's probably between this and Midnight's as the bottom of a. And you're, sure. We'll leave that. We'll leave folklore aside for now. We may do.
I made the better folklore.
I was gonna say we may do the all-time Taylor rankings later this summer.
No. I think we're definitely going to do the all-time. I mean,
that's going to be a 2-hour.
I mean, look. The important thing is, like, I feel like I see a lot of people doing all-time Taylor rankings,
and they're all crazy.
Yeah, and it's also like it's cheap, it's chum, it's bait. Yeah, which is to say, see you in May or June.
the point I was going to make about this versus Midnight's, where I've landed 10 days out from the album release, is that Midnight's is worse because it's not about anything. It's so tossed off.
It's chaotic.
It's chaotic. It doesn't have a thrust. Like this album is definitely about something, And that's what I tried to do in my edit. So we'll get to our edits.
Yeah, and to that point, Midnights is a ramshackle collection of imperfect songs. This is a, frankly, relatively coherent collection.
Almost too coherent.
Yes, of imperfect songs, which do have thematic, by and large, through lines. I was thinking a lot about what you said about Joe Alwyn last week. And
Joe Alwyn is a footnote in his own personal history.
Bro, you've straight asterisk status. Out of control asterisk status.
It's like the meanest diss she could possibly, like, any of the semi-breakup songs that she's written about him, like, pale in comparison to the fact that The Rebound got an album and he got half a bar. Like, he got Metro Boomin'. You know
he really did. Like, did you see the TMZ Maddie Healy street
update?
No,
on
like
the street interview.
Yeah, where they're like, "Dude, have you heard the diss song?" And he's like, "Oh no, but I'm sure it's good."
Matt, how would you rate your Taylor diss track compared to the 30 others?
My diss track.
Yeah, Taylor's new song.
I haven't really listened to that much of it, but I'm sure it's good.
All right.
Thanks, man.
Have a good one.
Great response.
Exactly, like literally. It's the only response. Yeah. Like, salute to you, Maddie Healy.
Before we get into reviewing the Taylor Swift album 1 week later.
And as a total sidebar, Stagecoach looked pretty lit, I thought.
Oh, yeah.
I thought it looked lit.
Addison Rae was there.
Yeah, we're waiting.
Yeah. Anywhere Addison Rae is in 2023,
is where you're
2024
is where you're supposed to be.
Except Boiler Room.
I would have been happy to be there, to be fair.
With Addison.
I would have been happy to be. I think that would have been the way to be there.
Yeah. Like in the vicinity of Julia Fox and Addison Rae.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, before we get into reconsidering the Tortured Poets Department.
Every week on Popcast, we are going to relitigate Tortured Poets Department until like 2027.
Yeah. But we should talk about the sales numbers because they came in.
How many of the 19 versions did you purchase?
I didn't purchase any, but I think my streams, now that I've been playing around with
You're
a lot of the
contributing
tracks,
to the bottom line.
like we contributed. I didn't buy the Ghost Clear vinyl or whatever it's called, or all the different versions. I think you're right. There was 19.
According to Billboard.
According to
19
Billboard,
versions.
19. We ended up at 2.6 million total, including both streams and sales. I'm going to run down some of the specifics because I
just want to say 2.6 million. That is Metro Boomin in Future plus Metro Boomin in Future plus
Beyonce.
Plus Beyonce. Yeah.
So out of those 2.6 million albums sold, including streams, that's 1.9 copies in traditional album sales, including 859,000 for vinyl alone, which is an all-time record, beating herself from 6 months ago. Totally insane. This is stat from Ben Cesario, our colleague's story this morning. As recently as 2006, only about 900,000 LPs were sold in an entire year. Yeah. So she did that in 1 week.
Sure.
This, as album sales, this puts it just behind NSYNC, No Strings Attached in the year 2000, and Adele's 25, which did 3.4 million when she withheld it from streaming when it came out a few years back.
Single version, though.
Yes.
Not to...
Yeah, fine. And just on pre-sales alone, it sold 1.4 million copies on its first day. So that's including all the pre-sales.
Yeah.
And then it did another million
in streams and sales.
In streams and sales in the week after it came out. I mean, it's nuts. Like the 31 tracks, okay, like that. She was padding the stats a little bit by dropping this as a double album. And I think that ultimately hurt the reception. I think if we would have gone to bed at whatever 4 a.m. or woken up Friday morning when it came out and it just would have been the album and then she did the deluxe a week later like most people have been doing, it wouldn't have felt so oppressive.
This came up on Mailbag.
As a rollout, yeah, but the fact that it diluted the batting average, which I think is what we'll see, like when you boil this down to what are the best, most vibrant, necessary songs here, there are a lot of good songs here, but I think when you take it out of 31, which is the number that you had when you opened Spotify or Apple or however you were listening to this digitally in the days that it came out, it's daunting. And then you get to like the sameness of some of the production and the melodies. And I think that really dampened the overall reception to it. Though I have seen both anecdotally and online a sort of coming out of that saying, maybe we judged this too harshly. There was a couple pieces online over the last week, some that made some points and some that did not. There was the Bloomberg piece, which I feel like you should chime in on about how this shows that album review culture is broken because we shouldn't be making these decisions about whether an album is good or bad off of one or two middle of the night listens.
Right. So, okay. Two things can be true at once. One, that is basically true.
Sure.
That is what album review culture has become, or album reaction culture has become.
More so than just straight reviews.
Yes. Yeah. That is true. We here at the Times, we used to do a lot more overnight reviews of big albums, and then we pulled back from it because we fundamentally felt that was not the best way to approach big albums that demanded a lot of thought and consideration. That said, tell me you don't know how professional music criticism is done without telling me you don't know how professional music criticism is done. Many of the people who had very considered reviews, and our own Lindsay Zolad's among them,
which was mentioned in the lead of this Bloomberg piece,
obviously had the album
in advance.
Yes, now
which used to be way more normal.
Forgive me for aging myself here. Like I had Stankonia for like 3 months before it came out.
And I had it on Napster.
And I had Big Pun's debut album for like 8 months before it came out. Right. It was a very different time.
And some artists to this day do that. And some don't at all
You see
levels.
it more, I think, smaller artists, indie rock artists, people who have to build a press narrative in order to kind of get out of like the indie rock gravitational pull.
And people who crucially make vinyl.
Oh,
have to
that
finish
too.
their albums
Yes.
way in advance.
Yes. Now, and you saw this with Beyonce, how the vinyl was made, but it didn't actually have the final track list.
And I think that goes for some version of these Taylor ones as well.
Is that true?
Yeah,
Okay.
there's some
aren't
slight
bold.
differences.
Okay. So people get advances.
The biggest critics mostly
Get advances.
although not of Beyonce, I think, crucially in the
Yes.
Cowboy Carter one, which
Now-
and you saw those reviews roll out a little more slowly than some of the big Taylor reviews.
I also want to say, just in defense of like the people who do the work that I do, the best can turn around an incredible review in under 12 hours. Like, absolutely. Like, have I turned out what I believe to be like A-level criticism overnight? Yes, absolutely. Like when I had to do it, when I had to be there at midnight, absorb it 2, 3, 4 times, and then stay up till noon the next day writing, I like to think it was pretty good. Mm-hmm. Is that my preferred mode? Of course not. Like, would I like to take it home? Would I like to have it in the car? Like, of course. But basically, the thing that was being argued in that Bloomberg thing makes it clear that person doesn't understand that some critics get advances. Right. And at least a few talked about it on Twitter in response to that piece. Sure. It's not something that we talk about a lot. It's just like, it's process. But yes, we get advances. And then I have in the past, in albums that I've reviewed in the past, I've gotten advances all kinds of weird ways. It is in the interest of an artist's rollout and publicity machine to provide the people who need access to the music with access to the music.
And often a presidential speech, the people who are going to be reviewing that speech have read it in advance. Not to compare, but yes, that's how a lot of high level.
Are you saying that Tortured Post Department is a presidential
address?
Speech?
Yes. Yeah. And then on the flip side, we don't have to dwell on this. We mentioned it last week, like Tom Bryan at Stereogum
did a great job.
He was on the mailbag with you.
Yeah.
He has a column called Premature Evaluation. Like, that's the whole joke. And he wrote one of the best reviews of the Taylor album because that's what he does. And he's been doing it for longer than a lot of us have been alive.
Yeah, of course.
Like, that's what he does. He cranks out a first reaction. That said, there's the CNN op-ed
I didn't see
came
this.
out.
What is it?
The headline is "I judged Taylor Swift's album immediately after it came out. Here's why I was wrong." And this is a version of the text I got over the weekend, which is like, three, 4, 5 listens in.
It's fine.
Pretty good.
Okay. I have a sort of a balancing narrative to that.
Sure.
And this is really tied to what I would say is the relationship between critic culture and stan culture.
Mm-hmm.
And it came from an email that we got from Mailbag that didn't arrive until after we recorded it. And unfortunately, I'm having some trouble finding it right now. But the thrust of the email, and if this was yours, forgive me for not being able to find it on short notice.
You're going to paraphrase.
I'm going to paraphrase. The thrust of it was that the primary engine of Taylor Swift fandom right now, and dare I say standom, is COVID/folklore forward, which is to us who are professional critics who've been covering Taylor since 2008, an ahistorical way of looking at Taylor and engaging with Taylor.
2020 forward.
Yes.
Basically.
But if your starting point is folklore and you're moving forward from there, everything on Tortured Poets Department probably makes a tremendous amount of sense.
Even if you've gone back and engaged with the Taylor's versions re-releases.
Right, but if your fall in love point is folklore evermore, if that's where you kind of bought into what Taylor can do as an artist and you're still relatively young, everything that is on this album existed on those two albums or existed on Midnight's Lover.
Mm-hmm.
And so it feels totally to me of a piece with this era.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that said, of all the Taylor eras, is this my favorite era, quote unquote? It's not my favorite era. But
and you're counting these 4 years as one large era.
Abstractly.
And even maybe 2019 with some of Lover in there.
Yes. I think, to me, this is not the best stuff that Taylor's ever done, but I think you could see it as of a piece. And I think if that is your entry point, this album probably makes way more sense than if you're thinking about Fearless, Red, Reputation, 1989, etc.
Well, this goes back to a point you made on the Drake episode, either this year or last, which is also like, if you're 18,
yes,
Drake was your Drake.
Yes.
You know, that Drake is your Drake, and
Taylor's
and
your
so
Taylor.
on and so forth, and like any version of Taylor, and that's sort of the magic and the sort of canny of this era of Taylor. Really, is that all the old stuff and the new stuff coexist at the same time. So you can have something like All Too Well, and the people who weren't born when All Too Well came out can relive it as if it's fresh with the 10-minute version and getting it to go number one. And we saw it even more recent history with Cruel Summer. Like, the folklore Taylor fans went back and were like, hey, that Cruel Summer song, like, pretty good.
Yeah.
And then that becomes her biggest radio hit of last year or whatever it was. So I think you're right that what angle you're viewing Taylor at really affects how you're digesting an album like
and
this.
I think a lot of the initial cool reaction to this album is because it encapsulates and either improves upon or doesn't, but it feels like the summation of the least effective era of Taylor for I think a lot of people who've been around for a really long time. So if you're going to battle with someone for whom this is the encapsulation of the first and best era, you're always going to be at war with that person.
But I will say something I have felt with her since at least Reputation is the way she writes a pop song, which is like a little wonky, at least as she's gotten more comfortable and less Max Martin-y, less scientific. It does sometimes take 3 or 4 listens before you really realize, or 5 or 6 or 7, like, oh, that part is stuck in my head. Like, she really, she alludes to it on one of these songs. Like, she puts drugs in these things.
Yeah.
And like, sometimes they creep up on you. And that's another thing I think she has in common with Drake. Like, I remember, now I'm dating myself, I remember when Started From the Bottom came out, and I was like, what is he what is he doing here? Like, this isn't the Drake we signed up for. And then 10 listens, 100 listens, 10 years later, you're like, oh, like, it makes total sense. And you might not get it until the sky clears. You know what I mean? Like, it takes a little bit, and they're so big. They're like they're the Titanic, so they're sort of like inching in a new direction, and sometimes it takes the listeners a while to catch up to the subtle tweaks.
Also, the important thing, and again, I'm not sort of an intention of the author person, but I think it's important, and I think this as much with Drake as I do with Taylor. In the present moment, you're observing these kind of like small changes, but the artist knows where they're going.
Yeah.
They're tilting. They're, not to be all billiards about it, but it's like they're setting up
the next
three shots down the road.
Yeah.
And so you're only seeing the one shot. And so maybe there's 2 or 3 or 4 where that's a logical path. Is this a logical path of something? I don't know. It feels more like the end of something to me.
And I think
agree it could
with that.
be. But I think a lot of times when an artist turns, and an artist who's very smart is turning somewhere and is taking you there one small step at a time. That said, 31 songs, a lot of songs.
It's too many songs.
It's a lot of songs. I know you were already making an edited version, a trimmed version. This is something you do.
Yeah,
this is
with albums that I feel like are too long,
Yes.
which most albums are, especially now. I'm also of the mindset, this has been a take of mine forever, there's no double album that wouldn't be better as a single album. And I firmly believe that, including all of the classic double albums that you're going to put in the comments. Like, great for you. Make an edited version, it'll be better. And like, fine. I also get that sometimes the sprawl is the point, but I prefer a tighter listen because I grew up on CDs. I don't know.
I decided to rise to the challenge as well.
Yep. I did teach you how to move tracks around on a Spotify playlist before we started.
Grandpa's here.
And I don't even use Spotify.
I made a 12-song version.
Okay. I ended up at 13.
Okay.
So we're in the same ballpark.
I made a 12-song version. It's not, my through line is not narrative. My through line, I tried to build it. I mean, we were texting about this yesterday. I tried to build it like an album with like a beginning, highs, lows, middle parts.
Sure.
I tried to build it in that way.
Yeah. And this was basically as if Taylor was Lil Wayne and we were Mac Main. Some people will know what I'm talking about. And he was like, here's the 31 songs I've got. Make an album.
Yeah, make something.
So we executive produced a playlist, each of us. And obviously we'll link to these in the comments.
Yes, Joe will figure out how to do that.
So where'd you start? Let's just go there and then you can run down.
I started with the Black Dog.
I'm just going to jump to it. I ended with the Black Dog.
Okay.
How you don't miss me in the shower, and remember how my rain-soaked body was shaking. Do you hate me? Was it hazing for a cruel fraternity I pledged, and I still mean it? Old habits die scream.
I started with the Black Dog because I felt like I didn't love Fortnite as an opener. I don't love it as a song. It's a little too spectral.
Is it on your list?
It's not on my list.
Okay, so I'll just jump right in and say, since we're talking about it, I kept Fortnite where it was. I tried to winnow out what I felt didn't fit the story lyrically.
Okay.
And thematically.
You cut all the Alwyn songs?
No, actually, I kept one. But I think they can also apply because,
Yeah, British.
two of these guys are from London. Or two of these guys have London
a place where I have lived.
Yes, I've heard. But I think Fortnite works to me as an opener, and I kept it where it was. But it's interesting that you just cut it entirely.
Yeah, I felt like it set the boat out at the wrong port.
Okay.
It didn't like it was not the place. It needed to start somewhere else. How do we want to do this? You want to just run through your list?
Well, could you tell me why you picked the Black Dog first, and then I want to ask overall how many tracks from the quote unquote second disc made
That's
your
actually
playlist?
super good. I didn't do the math on it,
Okay.
but we'll do the math.
Okay.
I started with the Black Dog because I felt like it was.
You're starting in media res, basically, by starting with the Black Dog, I feel like.
Yeah, but that's okay. But is that wrong?
It's cool. No,
Yeah.
it's cool.
To me, I felt like the Black Dog was a good example of Taylor's singing. It had a specificity, whether or not the Black Dog is real. I mean, there's all the threads.
Yeah, they flooded
They
some
flooded
bar called
some
Black
random
Dog.
bar. Congratulations to
Some
those
pub, excuse me.
Yeah, that's congratulations to them. It had Taylor specificity.
You share your location with anyone?
No. Are you kidding me? Do you? I mean,
No.
not even?
No. Never.
Okay.
Never. Literally never.
Never. I can't. How would I do that?
Yeah. Right.
Literally, how would I do
Right,
that?
right.
That's it. If anybody's ever been in my phone and turned it on, possibly, I suppose. But no, I have never voluntarily done that. So the singing I like the specificity of it, and I like that it's not overly deterministic stylistically. I think the reason Fortnite was tough for me is it felt very deterministic stylistically.
Yeah.
This felt like there's two basic directions on this album, Antonoffian and Desnerian. This feels like it kind of lives a little bit in between
splits the
those two.
difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, that felt like a good jumping off point.
Okay, yeah, and I like this song. I put it at the end of mine because I really like it. I think it's the best song on the second part of this album, the anthology version. I only included one other song from the anthology.
I did more.
Yeah, I only the other
Like I said,
one I
I
have
made
is,
better folklore.
The other one I have is "I'm Gonna Get You Back," which even given the complications that we talked about last episode, the conceit being the same as an Olivia song, and I like them both.
Gonna smash up your bike, I haven't decided yet. But I'm gonna get you back. Whether I'm gonna curse you out or take you back to my house, I haven't decided yet. But I'm gonna get you back.
And I think this is a good version of that, and it's fun. It's really catchy. It's one of the tighter pop songs on here, so I have that somewhere on the second half of mine. But other than that, all of my the 11 other songs on my playlist are all from the album proper.
I might be like 6 and 6.
Okay.
Or 7 and 5.
Interesting. All right, you want to run through your whole thing and then talk me through it.
So after the Black Dog, I have My Boy Only Breaks, His Toys.
Okay, I left that one out.
Okay.
But I think it's fine. It was an edge. It was an edge case for me.
I Look in People's Windows,
Oh wow.
which I thought, like, the more I listened to it, I was like, this is dark. This is a really an unwell person wrote this song. Jeez.
Which again, it's like the character of this album, and I think sometimes it works and sometimes
Yeah.
it doesn't. That one hasn't grabbed me.
I found that the songs that ended up grabbing me, especially on the back half of the record, on the anthology part of the record, again, people know I've not been a fan of Dessner and what Dessner has done to Taylor and with Taylor. But what I think is some of the more fraught songwriting needs the space that Dessner is giving here. I don't love the tone of the piano. Like, I don't like the tone of the guitar. Like, I don't love some of the specifics of it, but I feel like it needs a space. And the Antonoff stuff, to me, has felt more cluttered here. So I Look in People's Windows. Then So Long London, the Compromise song. Who's Afraid of Little Old Me?
That was another.
That was an edge case for you?
To me, that was the.
That's not on yours.
No.
Oh,
that
wow.
And that was the one where I was like, I had it on and then I took it off.
Oh, wow.
Because I respect it, but I don't like listening to it. It's a little. The mixed metaphors bother me a bit. It's a little. You know what it is?
Little whiny?
It's a Reputation.
It is.
Song to me, so it makes sense that you like it.
Yeah.
It's very. It's theatrical in a way that I don't love. But I find you drawn a little bit more to the operatic theatricality that Taylor does.
Yes.
Like on Reputation, for instance. And
Is this the one that I referred to as the Baz Luhrmann song?
I mean, it is.
Yeah,
the
it is the Baz Luhrmann song. Yeah, yeah.
It's like, and it has
yeah.
circus imagery, and it's the Greatest Showman. I respect it, but I was like, I don't want to listen to it that often, so I kept it off of mine.
Then I have the Tortured Poets Department title track. Then I have The Smallest Man Who Ever Lived. Love of My Life. LOML.
Which you called out as a favorite.
One of my
initially.
favorites. Into Chloe or Sam or Sophie or Marcus.
What do you like about it?
What strikes me about this song is I like Taylor. I know that those are real people. Like, they're not named that, but I know that they're
Those are
real.
Blake Lively's future kids.
Yeah, right. I feel like sometimes Taylor's distaste, her kind of like teeth sucking, comes out in these very precise details, and like these names feel like stand-ins for archetypes, like much like in the All Too Well 10-minute video where you like look around the dinner table, whatever, and I'm just like, these are the archetypes. Like it's like that's these people.
Which she also alludes to in But Daddy I Love Him, where she says the specific name. She says the Hannahs and the whatever.
Yes, right, the pearl clutching thing. Yeah. Although I feel like that's more about fans.
Right. Yes. Different people. But
different people. But yes.
Naming the
archetypes.
basically.
Yes. So to me, I can feel the like teeth suckingness in this, but it's done in a way where it's like patient and contemplative and da. But it's also just like.
So let's listen to a little bit of that one, because I feel like this
does
one's
get
gotten
lost.
lost in the shuffle.
I agree.
If you wanna break my cold, cold heart, just say I loved you the way that you were. If you wanna tear my world apart, just say you've always wondered.
Now for final three, I think my version of this album is like way more down temp. Like it's way sadder than the actual album.
You're a secret Dessner head. Not only are you a tortured poet, but you're a Dessner head.
It's been instructive.
Yeah.
Honestly, this has been instructive.
Yeah.
I have not done the thing. That should be a real segment, is like that should be our first Twitch stream.
Okay.
It's like subjecting me to folklore, like live, and like watching me
A
engage
live
with
reconsideration
of folklore.
That might also be summer content or winter
Or
content.
winter content. All right, final three songs, Clarabeau, and then two more from the anthology,
Wow.
Peter
Okay.
and the manuscript. To me, I think what I ended up going with, I was thinking a lot about
You a little
Sonic.
depressed this weekend?
Yeah, maybe. I was thinking I've been sick on and off for like 3 weeks, so maybe a little bit. I think I was thinking a lot about sonic cohesion. I also, one thing that I did not reassess or did not feel differently about was like how much like the Antonophian, like the gestures, just like I just don't want to hear them anymore. So I think maybe I'm running from them a little bit. But I also felt like this felt like a coherent top to bottom sonic idea driven album with like one or two spikes.
Sure. It's funny. We went in very different directions. In fact, we made sort of the anthology like between us. We made a 35 track version.
Okay. So what was your sort of like guiding principle?
I mean, I wanted hooks and I wanted hits, and I basically made a synth pop album. You know, I made like the synth pop album that was here and like maybe I thought I was sick of, but grew on me. So I started with Fortnite, as we said.
Yep.
And I sort of like jumped in. The top is like mostly songs from the top of the regular album, but I wanted to go harder basically into making,
Harder, faster.
Yeah, harder, faster. So I went Down Bad next.
Oh, wow.
Which I feel like is silly, but again, like on purpose in a way that at first I thought it was too cringy, but now I'm like, okay, the metaphor of a rebound as an alien invasion, and then you just get left back on Earth, and you're like, what am I supposed to do? Like that, like, and just the silliness of like crying at the gym, the lyrics, her using Twitter speak and sort of like online speak, like Down Bad, you know, like the fact that now there's a song called Down Bad on a Taylor album when there was, you know, rap songs called this 5-10 years ago. It's like sometimes it works for her, sometimes it doesn't, but I feel like she gets away with it here again because of what the song is about. Then I have Tortured Poets Department, which I think works. The title track, we both have it on there. And then I'm jumping right into I Can Do It With a Broken Heart.
Yeah.
That you left that one off because it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. It
doesn't
your vibe.
fit. I like it. It just didn't quite hold, and I felt like you went witty, punchy Taylor.
Yeah.
I went in my sad bag Taylor. So,
and I will say, like Down Bad, like the chorus of this song, you know, I cry all the time, whatever, like all that, like that's one of the best hooks on the album. Like that chorus to me, it's what she does best. She's writing about herself, obviously, but there's like there's enough self-deprecation, but she's still flexing. You know, it's like it this song really, really worked for me.
Sure. I think I made more of an effort to reconcile the two halves of this thing.
Okay.
And
I leaned into one.
Yeah.
But then this is my Dessner, then track 5, which historically among Swifties is like an important track. Usually a sad one. I think So Long London is track 5 on the real album.
Yes.
But I just put Daddy I Love Him there because to me that's the high point of this album. It has all of the things, all the imperfections that I find a little bit annoying about this album, but it lands them. Like, you know, the Vipers line, like it's too verbose. And yet like the chorus is so tight. And also she brings in the third chorus perspective shift, which is like the country Taylor, and I think a nod to Love Story on this one specifically, where she gets back together with the rebound, you know, which is like, I like the narrative thrust of that one. Guilty as Sin, you left off.
I did.
That's another like synth pop one that's been stuck in my head a lot.
Yeah.
It's really, I'm going to say lustful in a way that she hasn't always been successful at, but this one landed, you know, I'm like, oh, she's like,
Let's listen to this
she's
one.
down bad.
We should listen to this one.
Yeah.
I keep recalling things we never did. The sweet talk, lip kiss, how long for our tryst, without ever touching his skin. How can I be guilty as sin?
That was another one that I feel like didn't get as much attention on the main album as some of the other ones that
But
you
I
picked.
feel like it's like a sleeper. Like I feel like you're seeing more and more memes about how insane of a song
more and
that
more
is.
people are talking
More
about
and more people are
it.
memeing Guilty as Sin. I'm gonna get you back. I have, and then this is where I sort of like downshift.
Okay.
And I have So Long London, which I think, you know, again, some of the tighter writing
Yes.
on the album, which I appreciate. You know, the thing about the fog clearing or whatever, and she says like, but I love this place. Like those that feels vintage to me from her. And then I have The Alchemy, which I think is another one. That was one where I'm like, do I like this? Is it too soggy? But it has just enough little vocal melodic hooks that I kept coming back to it. And same thing, I Can Fix Him, No Really I Can is my next track. And that was one where I was on the fence, but it fit the story I was telling with my playlist. And then my last 3 sort of going out, Smallest Man Who Ever Lived was on yours too. I think that one just builds really nicely. It feels epic when it gets to the bridge and the outro, which we talked about at length the first time we talked about this album. This is like, if you're asking about Maddie Healy about the diss track, I think like this is the diss track.
Probably, yes.
And it's quite brutal in a classic.
Yeah, this
All
is
Too
the
Well, Dear
Jehovah's
John.
Witness
Witness
suit,
suit.
the buying drugs from a friend of a friend, or
Sliding
trying
into inboxes. You know, girls who are, she's too young for you, bro.
Yeah,
like, all of that is in here.
And candidly, if this is the song that he was being asked at, and he said, "I'm sure it was good," he was right.
He was right. Then I have Clara Bow, which you also have, which I think is a good album closer, but it's a little too obvious as an album closer. So I did like the album closer Fake Out, and I put Clara Bow into The Black Dog, which felt like an after credits scene to me. Like the movie ends on Clara Bow, and then there's like a little bit more.
And also, I mean, you know, in the 31 track version, it does flow into that, and it actually does kind of flow into that.
Yeah,
like
it's the first song on the second disc.
Right, and if anything, Black Dog feels like it belongs on the first disc more than it belongs on the second disc. I actually, as I was going through this exercise, because I found myself a little bit more sympathetic to the album than I was 7 days ago, I was actually thinking much more about if we had to cut 10 songs rather than pick 10 songs or 12 songs. Cutting 10 songs felt like an easier task. Like a lot of the songs that you have from the first part, I think they're fine. Like they're fine. They're not my favorites, but they solve a problem.
Right.
Whereas I'm looking at a song like So High School.
Right.
Or the Kim song.
Right.
Thank You, Amy.
Right. F-U-C-K.
Yeah, F-U-C-K,
Whatever.
right.
Like,
You
shout
know,
out to Britney.
Right. I look at those and I'm like, those can just get excised.
Right.
So maybe the real answer is not so much that there's a 12 or 13 song version that needs to come out, as much as maybe there's like a 20 song version that keeps the best stuff that you picked, the best stuff that I picked, has those synth pop highs, has those depressive highs, and then all this stuff that like seems pretty obviously like a demo that like no one sat down and really sandpapered. All that stuff,
Like you said, it's
watched.
the vault, but in the instant vault.
It's the vault in real time.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I did have a sad weekend.
Where do you stand on, like, if you have to chop up an album, make your own playlist version? Like, obviously that's where we're at as a culture and music.
Yes,
Like,
everything's an edit.
everything is an edit.
Yep.
But does it mean that it's a bad album? Like, if it's not good in the way that it was delivered to you by the artist, or are we so deep into remix culture that, like, if you can find 12, 13 songs you want to listen to on an album, that means it's a great success?
I mean, this is how I felt about a lot of hip hop albums for a long time. So it's like, I think maybe we are moving that's expanding, you know, hip hop often very early on technological innovation. I think that's how I felt about a lot of hip hop records for a long time. You talked earlier about the reception of this album, and we talked about it on Main Mailbag last week. To me, it depends who's doing the receiving. Like, a fan is taking this not necessarily as starting as track 1 and going to track 31. They're taking it as a full set of information that's going to be absorbed in 100 different ways. I think a fan, more likely than listening from track 1 to track 31, absorbing tracks that they really like, making jokes on Twitter, making TikToks. Taylor made sure that the album was on TikTok and available. People are absorbing it that way. I just don't think that absorption is linear at all anymore. And so, you know, some reviews refer to data dumps. That's certainly something that I've talked about in prior reviews, Post Malone and Ray Shremmerd and Migos and et cetera. It's how much are you putting into the slipstream? And so as an album, top to bottom, maybe there's like 50 people that care about that.
Right.
But I just don't think that that's the primary thing anymore. But for me, it still matters. But I don't do the thing that you do.
Right.
If anything, if I get bored by track 5 and I love tracks 8 through 10, I may never get to 8 through 10 because like I'm listening and I'm like, by track 5, I'm like, I don't like this so much. Should we go out on something that we both like?
Yeah.
Yeah, So Long London, the true compromise point on this album, and the high watermark of Joe Alwyn content, allegedly.